Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching Current Affair with Shoaib Zaidi, and it's Queensland time, Monday, and we would like to see a weekly program, Queensland tomorrow. Let me introduce today our guest. As usual, we are very thankful from 72 News and myself also for Professor Grant Pitman. He's with us today, as usual, and we have Dr. Bernard Malik. Both political experts. They are experts in international politics as well as local politics. And we would like to welcome Dr. Bernard Malik. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Pitman, thank you very much, sir, for you also. And as we already know that election in the state of Queensland is over, but there's a lot of things is happening, and that's a part of the life. The life moves when the things are getting changed. And the latest breaking news is that the opposition leader, after losing the election, LNP has changed the opposition leader as well as their previous, they removed or I don't know, she has resigned. Let's start from Dr. Bernard Malik. Dr. Bernard Malik, why do you think that why Deb Frampton stepped down as a Queensland LNP opposition leader?
Thank you, Mr. Zaidi. People who come from subcontinent, we are leaders for life.
They're leader for life. Good.
We never give up. Over here, there is a leader with honor.
Leader with honor.
So what she felt was she could not deliver what she was appointed for, and she resigned so the new team could come in and carry on the agenda. So she stepped down.
She stepped down by herself.
Yeah.
Right. And before going for the same opinion, I'd like to know from Professor, but before that, I'd like to know, Dr. Bernard, why do you think she was not successful? What went wrong in her case? Her strategy was not up to the mark, or the expectation was different, or the leading party, they really worked differently? I'm talking about particularly the DEP.
Anytime you do analysis after the loss or after the victory, number of factors come in. There are a lot of variables all the time.
Right.
We do this in India and Pakistan. We say manan chintan. Ki baith ke socho ki ki hoya? What went wrong?
What went wrong? Yes.
Yes. Over here, I think she could not cash her charisma. She was going against 2 terms of the same premier.
Yeah.
There was an anti-incumbency factor.
Right.
But I think that played poorly to it. She did not have a narrative. She was not charismatic enough, and she could not sell to people that she was the better leader.
Right. Right. So it means I like to go in detail when I come back from Professor Pitman, because look like that when we discuss about that it's she, so it means that she did not perform up to the mark. However, the question is still arises that it means that there was inappropriate plans from the party that is the right candidate or they have the better choice. But before moving that, I like to get some opinion from Professor Pitman. Thank you very much, Professor Grant Pitman. As usual, you are with us. Ultimately, you are very busy, and always I find you are busy doing attending a lot of political meetings. Today, as you know, the last week they announced that there is no more liberal leader in the Queensland. First, we would like to discuss, and then we will discuss the upcoming leader. So, and in media, there's the 2 things: step down or removed or resigned. So, these things. What do you think that she was removed by the party or she resigned by herself?
In Australia, they have what they call conventions. Conventions aren't rules, but they're practices. And when you generally lose an election, the convention is that you stand aside and your party then can decide whether or not they want to keep you or have someone else run the parliamentary party arm of the in this case the LNP. The problem Deb Flecken had was on the night of the election, she said she'd stay on as the leader. And that's not the convention. The convention is they step down and allow the politicians to decide if she should be held accountable, he or she should be held accountable. And as a result, they'll either keep the opposition leader or they will choose somebody else. Right. And in this case, Deb Fleckington overstepped the convention. And as a result, the party and her colleagues said, well, no, the convention is that you step down and allow the parliamentary politicians to decide if they wish to hold you accountable for the election, or if they're happy that you've done a reasonable job, we'll keep you on. Right. So there were two issues. She didn't follow the convention, and because she didn't follow the convention, the party, as well as the politicians who were in, said that it would be wiser if you step down and allow the parliamentary arm to decide who they want as their leader.
Right. Now, here the question came that once the convention decided, and she look in normal practice, whenever we lose the elections or we lose any game, then the blame game starts, and we try to find out the sacrifice code that okay, where we are going to do. Do you think that she is the only responsible for losing the election, or it was a party decisions? And what went wrong in her practices? What exactly policy being expert you think that if she might consider these practices, might be the result will be different? Professor.
Generally, here in Australia, and Dr. Bernard would say that we're more presidential now, which means that the leader must take responsibility. I take a little bit broader view and suggest that everybody who was involved in the major strategy for the campaign should be held accountable. So that the leader, Deb Fleckington, had a series of advisors on policy, strategy, media and social media approaches to be taken. The party had a responsibility to get the best candidates. So there was a whole range of strategies that had shared responsibility between the party organisation and the politicians. So I don't think you can blame Deb Fleckington for everything. I think there's a lot of people should be held accountable for it. And now they go into a process of review where they will have an internal review, generally by somebody independent of the people who ran the election, but within the party machinery, who will do a review and will come back and they will have suggestions about policy, the strategies, the media strategies, the perhaps the candidates, and exactly whether or not their plan for the election was feasible considering the circumstances that were occurring in Queensland. So that review will probably come out within the next month or two.
Right, right. Let me, Dr. Bernard Malik, Professor Pitman has mentioned the usage of media, social media, and then other platforms and all these stuff. And again, and as he mentioned, review and process and everything there. What being expert, and I know that you're also busy attending a lot of political gatherings in our system, in our Asian system, we call it political corner meetings and all the stuff. Here is a different kind of shapes there, meeting the people privately, political people, and meeting the people in publicly also. What exactly do you think that, as he mentioned already, the role of the social media, role of the media, and all these actions, where she will be accountable for herself, or review will decide? And does this review after 1 month will make any more changes to these things? This is one part. And second part will be do you think that the number of the seat which Liberal took, they were expecting this?
There is always a review. This is a political game in every country. Political animals are same everywhere, whether it's Australia, India, Pakistan, US. You see what's happening in US. When it comes to reviews, this is what they do. When they don't want to be accountable for something, they will form a committee. They form a committee, they tell them, oh, let's get the review done. It will take 2-3 weeks or 2-3 months. By then, people have forgotten the issue, so review doesn't carry any message. We have a joke in Christian circles that God was so serious about saving the world, He sent His only Son. He could have sent a committee and the world would not have been saved. So anytime you don't want anything done, form a committee. From that point, yes, I don't think forming a committee always helps. They have formed a committee last time they lost, and they formed a committee the time before they lost.
Right.
Queensland is notorious. They never win here. And the one time they won, they were too aggressive in bringing the reforms that people didn't like that.
Right.
So your other question was, what was the other question?
The number of the seats. Everybody was expecting that they are going to be having close number of the seats, not the least number of the seats, the one they receive at the end. So do you think that again, that was because of the party leader or because of the party decision?
See, as Professor Pitman said, when you do analysis of the factors, yes, you cannot blame the leader alone. The politics here is very, very different. They give the seat to the person maybe sometimes 3 months or a month before the election. Barely when the papers go to print, the ballot papers go to print, that's when sometimes they decide a candidate. Right. It doesn't work that way. Candidates many times don't have name recognition, they don't have any networking in the community. It is hard to carry a seat. Like in our country, the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif ran from the same constituency, elected year in out every time, and if he left, his daughter would run, and if the daughter leaves, his brother would run. So they always catered to the electorate. Over here, that custom is not here.
Right.
And if they lose, they don't
practice in our system, or do you think because here adding candidate just a month ago, where the ballot paper is going to for print, or keeping live all the years elections live?
Look, all the systems have their plus and minuses. The good thing here is you would see when they lose an election, they go and find a job and they start earning for the kids. In our case, if the election is lost, they get to destruction. The party that loses does the tarnas, roadblocks, railway blocks, try to get people worked up against the ruling party and get nothing done.
Right.
So this country is great, not because you had funny politicians here. This country is great because you had so many statesmen trying to get into politics for all the right reason and do their contributions and move on.
Right.
In this case, yes, they did not anticipate they would lose so many seats, but they lost. And now you would see so many seats they did not even expect to win.
Right.
But they lost few. So they did not have their numbers right. If somebody comes in, they will target that we need to have 50 seats, and they should target 55 seats. There are some seats you can never win. And so why try on the seats that you cannot win? Why don't you focus your energies on winnable seats? And the interesting point that is different here, unlike our countries, is over here candidate is left to himself. He goes and raises his own funds, he has his own strategy. It's not party all the time comes. Party sees you, if you are a liability, they will not put money behind you.
Right.
Put money behind you only if they think you can win. So many times, if candidate wins, it is only because of his effort and not because there was an organization to support. Of course, there is always dedicated vote that is for the party. And it is a swing vote that is relevant to the message.
Right.
So if a candidate has a great message, there will be few percentage of the people that, wow, this is the guy we want to vote, and they vote for him.
Right. Professor Pitman, Dr. Bernard Malik has mentioned as an analyst a really a real picture that okay, which areas, which seats are important, where the competition is very tight, rather than putting energy on some areas where don't things. Being an expert, a political analyst, and you've been engaged with the parties, do you think that these parties, liberal, because at this stage we're discussing about the failure of the liberal, do you think the liberal have the people, expert like Dr. Bernard can see, you can see, those anyone who is interested in politics who can see? So why do you think that they have the people, those can advise them or advising them regularly that okay, this is the area, these are the seats, and ultimately, and these advice has a big role in the losing also.
I think both political parties, both Labor and LNP, plus the minor parties, have a very close look at the demographics, in other words, who lives in the area.
Right.
The second thing they look at is the margins. I think Dr. Malik mentioned there was about a dozen seats that only had a margin of a couple of hundred. So you stand a better chance if you target those seats. You also got the reasons why candidates run. Some candidates, and I've dealt with quite a few over the years, run because of the brand. In other words, if I run with the LNP or Labor with that brand, I'm going to win. Others run on the prospect that I really want to change what's occurring in my community, and I've got good values, so I'll run for that reason. Others run because they believe in the party philosophy.
Right.
Certainly that may be true in the Greens. Some run, I think, because they can't find anybody else. And that's true probably more in the Conservative politics, that they put a candidate in just to fill the gap. And I think the electorate knows that. And when the electorate knows that, they just don't get any support. And I'm in an area where the local Conservative candidate only registered hours before the final time cutoff was. So it was a decision made very, very late. They had no other option, but they had to run with him. And as a result, they didn't do very well at all. So I think there's a range of factors, but the Conservatives have problems because they are targeting candidates, but often they can't get the candidates they want.
Right. Now, here, the last question, last note I need from you, and then we can change to the new leader from there. So, Mr. Pitman, one thing we discussed about the Labour, that we know that the situation say that they are going to win, and they win with the more than expectation. This question coming back inversely for the Liberal, that seats they took, and we done a lot of analysis also. Do you think that the party were expecting, or the people were expecting that they are going to lose this much seat and they are coming back to this number?
This is an interesting question, actually. Quite often in party politics, they don't do their full analysis. Right. They run on, I call it the brand. In other words, they see themselves as the party of choice, so they run on that. But the other parties, particularly Labor, do it very well. They analyse the seats. Certainly the Conservatives do it as well, but they know their constituents very well. In one area, which Dr. Bernard knows quite well, where I was involved with, called Mount Omni electorate, the local candidate there, Jesse Pugh, had visited over 20,000 people, had been contacted. And there's 35,000 people voting. So she had dealt with over close to 60% of the people. And by doing that and working her electorate, she was extremely well known and picked up close to 60% of the vote. So those who do their homework certainly will win the seats. Those who don't do their homework may be lucky enough to win on the brand name of the party, but that's not the case as often now.
Right, right. Dr. Bernard Malik, now we discussed about the day, and we done some kind of postmortem about what could be the reason. Ultimately, we discuss about what we find, what we saw, what is happening. You know, we can't see behind the wall, definitely. But now we are going to welcome opposition leader, Mr. David Crisafulli. He is going to be leading the party as well as a opposition leader. Would you know about him? How's he, and how long he's in the politics?
His political life hasn't been that long in terms of him being very active. He won his first seat in 2012.
Right.
But he's been involved for a long time politically.
Right.
He was chief of staff of a senator. So he knows the game well.
He knows him well.
Yes. They were going to bring him to around 2 months before the elections. And I'm sure if they had brought him, the situation would have been perhaps better if they had not won the power or so. He is a very good guy. He used to be a reporter before, so he knows what words mean. He can articulate, and I think he is a new hope for LNP party in Queensland.
Same thing I would like to know, Professor Pitman, also, how you're looking the new leader, what expectation do we have? Some other day we will discuss about him, how is moving, how is it progressing. But at this stage, about his engagement, how did you find him, Professor Pitman?
One of the difficulties the LNP has is this will be about the 8th or 9th leader in 30 years, opposition leader. So unless he really stamps his values plus the party values and where they want to go and give strong leadership, it may be seen as just another one of the 7 or 8 who have failed again.
Right.
The second issue about him is that in his speech recently, he said he wants to hold the Labor government accountable. Well, that's a fundamental role of an opposition leader anyway. Any good opposition leader should automatically be holding the government to accountable. The difficulty that I had was that when he gave his speech, there had been differences between the parliamentary arm and the political arm about 6 to 8 months ago, when they wanted to change to David from Deb Fleckington, and they made a decision to stay where they were. So the problem that has occurred is there's a difference between the party and the parliamentary group.
Right.
And they've made a comment, he's made a comment in his speech that they're going to set up a specialist office in the party headquarters so that they can meet regularly. Well, I thought the party office was designed for them to meet regularly anyway. So I don't know why they need a special room to meet. They should be meeting there anyway.
So you think they are creating a slot, especially for a place where you can have some private discussion, you don't like to disclose in front of, these offices?
I think the message David was sending was that the bridges have been mended between the parliamentary arm and the political arm by saying they would meet together. But my comment was that was always the purpose of the offices that were available for them to discuss. I think they've got to come to an understanding of their relationship and better define it is more important, and have guiding principles upon which they operate. But at the moment, it's still unclear as to how he's going to operate with his party machinery.
Right. I think at this stage, because it's just to start a journey, And for starting a journey, these comments are still very valid, very valuable. And ultimately, Dr. Bernard Malik and Professor Pitman already mentioned about Mr. David, a new opposition leader and LNP leader, that his past indicates that he knows the value of words and how to engage. But on the other hand, Professor Pittman's raised his concern that the change of the opposition leader so frequently might does not give a real impact, because if you are leading long term, ultimately you are maintaining a strong impact. Now coming back to the now, because election is over, few policies there, so we would like to discuss something about what happening, what going on, and just like to know about our viewers that okay, we receive a question about that what will be the future of the job seeker and job keeper. Mr. Bernard Malik, you are very much involved as a businessman also, as in politics also, and you are very active human beings in community. This is living every day. People can see you. So how you're looking the future of job seeker and job keeper payments?
You would know in March, the country went into lockdown. Right. And I think other than US, Australia was the only country that kept everybody happy.
Right.
It gave a lot of money out. Everybody who had an ABN and had been working got $750 per week.
Right.
Some of these people got more than what they were actually making, $1,500 fortnight. And that was a nice way the federal government was handling this crisis. Yes, they couldn't balance the budget, but at least they balanced people's welfare and lifestyle.
Right.
There was no social adverse impact on people's lives. So if people don't have food, they would go and beg, borrow, and steal. If they don't have food, they will steal your food. If they don't have food, they will take to crime.
Yes.
And because Prime Minister was very successfully able to keep the food on people's table, he was able to reduce social crime. He was able to keep everybody happy.
Right.
But like everything else, there has to be a reality check.
Yes.
Went on for a very long time. And then he felt, okay, now we should do the other way. Kept people home, now we need to do it. We should incentivize the employers that they hire people, and then they started giving money to the employers.
Right.
Payroll were guaranteed. So for us, in one of my businesses, they paid part of the payment for the employees. So the only issue there was that you had to have made less money than last year, and it should be 30% less than last year. So any business that got affected, government gave them a lot of money.
Yeah, I think.
So that program is slowly getting changed.
Yes.
Seeker and job keeper program, they're keeping it for a little while. It will change again. At the end of the day, we need to have our own revival in terms of economy.
So when you talk about own revival, what does it mean?
A country like Australia, people are very resilient. This economy is generally people-driven and not government-driven. In our countries, the economy is government-driven. Government does it. Okay, we'll infuse this much money. We'll do this. So people just go there as a daily laborer.
Right.
Western countries, US and here and England, and you will see Germany, the people drive the economy. They go out and get out into businesses. They find opportunities. Government doesn't interfere much. Government just creates infrastructure and creates a system where people can do business without interference.
Right, right. Professor Pitman, job seeker and job keeper, ultimately it's new strategy, as Dr. Bernard very well explained, that just keeping the people engaged, positive, hopeful, and out of financial crisis or hardship. But again, how long and new state government, how they are going to handle it, being a political expert, and again, you also engage in the business engagements. So what you're looking, and do you think how long we can survive with this these job seeker and job keeper payments?
I think Dr. Bernard's raised the issue. Here in Australia, the government has a major impact on the economy, and certainly the Conservative government has outlaid tens of billions of dollars to keep the economy rolling over. The dilemma that the government faces is there's only so much money you can keep doing that, and you'll put the deficit of the government into extreme amounts, which means our children's children will probably be paying it off for generations. So on one hand, they want to help out the existing community and Australian citizens, but on the other hand, there'll be a burden that probably will be for the next 10 or 20 years here in Australia, which the next generation of workers will have to pay for. So they can't sustain it probably much longer than they've got it in place now, which is, I believe they reduced the job seeker payment last week, and the job keeper payments will be reviewed in March next year. So the dilemma that the government has is where they can keep the economy going for a period, but unless there's a stimulus to get the industry going again, the government probably may have a little bit more latitude, but not much here in Australia.
Right. I think at this stage, nothing can be said in case in terms of prediction, but as Dr. Bernard also mentioned, you also mentioned that by the time March will be the time when they're going to decide mostly and review everything. Very interesting happening in Rockhampton, Professor, that Rockhampton mayor resigned over Adani trip. That was one of the things, and unfortunately, it was also known and read in the article that the new mayor, who were not expecting to be mayor, but she become mayor. So what happening there in Rockhampton, and what is happening there?
I don't know the specifics of it, but the laws in Queensland and Australia are very specific about receiving payments, benefits, any sort of gratuity from developers or from industry.
Right.
And if it's seen that they get an advantage or a benefit from government, then there are legislation which will impact on their keeping their job, or in some cases even going to jail. So I would say that the person, the mayor, has accepted some sort of gratuity that breached the guidelines, either in legislation or in the council. And the councils in Queensland are governed by a state government act of parliament. So they're controlled by state government. So the dilemma that any mayor faces is whatever they receive or take from industry has to be declared and must fit within the legislation or the guidelines. And I'd say the Rockhampton mayor probably stepped outside the guidelines.
Dr. Bandar Malik, I'd like to know some note from you also about Adani, this incident and stepping down of the mayor. On the other hand, I like, because you know the value of the power. When the power is coming for these kind of issue, Adani, there is a two different mindset about Adani, accepting, not accepting. These breaches is very normal.
I've been involved with the top leadership of Adani for a while, and I have seen the difference. If you remember, during the last federal election, not this one, but the election before, Adanis were not getting anything at all. Their licenses were not approved. Greenies were putting pressure on their government. There was so much going on to distract their growth.
Right.
And then federal government came and said, no, we'll support them. And they won election. And then Labour government in the state realized, gosh, if we don't support these people, we will not win seats in the regional area. Right. So they came back, and all of a sudden, Adani's got a lot of approvals. Not that I look like Adani's, but I think Adani's are doing a great job there.
Right.
They have employed new people. They have paid the farmers well who are out there giving their land. I think the prosperity will come in the area that where no one goes. But if you hear greeny stories, oh, Adanis are going to ruin that area. People will be unemployed. At the end of the day, how can you be unemployed if there is industry in the area? Yeah. So if we're going to bring some money out there and bring prosperity, it's good for the country, it's good for the state, and it can't be bad for anybody.
Mr. Malik, on the other hand, as Professor already mentioned that because of the breaching of some boundaries, again, gifts or whatever it is, when it's coming to this position, how do you think that when coming back to a major projects, how you can have a control over these things?
Look, I think in any state of our life, whether you are husband, your father, you are a son, you are somebody's brother-in-law, we all have to be ethical. Whether these are our relationships or these are our businesses. And where something happens, especially politicians are held to a higher standards. If I may take liberty of saying one share in Hindi, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers are following Hindi and Urdu.
Yes.
The share is Guna sabke raj hote hain.
Right.
Guna sabke raj hote hain. कईयों के छुप जाते हैं और कईयों के छप जाते हैं. This is what it is. In all the offices. Okay, for the benefit of Professor Pitman, I'll translate. I'm sure he hasn't the difference yet.
Yes.
It's basically guna means the sins.
Yes.
Sins are our secrets, and some they get published, and for some they remain hidden. So if your sin is published, you have to resign. And if it stays hidden, you are considered a statesman and you carry on.
Right.
Dirty game. Many times people need not be unethical. People need not be bad. It just happens. At times, you're meeting hundreds of people every day. You're making, hundreds of decisions in your lifetime. Many a time you don't have the time to look through the file completely. You say, oh, okay, if it looks good, let's approve it. Then later you realize, oh, there was an unethical element to it because the file came to you from one of the builders. So you need to give the politicians the benefit of doubt that they are not always bad.
Right.
Sometimes you find somebody, is trying to cut corners. But otherwise, generally over here, I find people are very ethical. They're good people. Lot of the politicians that I know are really good people. Really, really good people. They want to improve the lifestyle of the community. They want to do something good for the community.
Definitely. That's why I know that you are with us. You know that what we are trying to achieve from this shows for the community, and similarly to Professor Pitman also. Professor Pitman, we come back to our last topic, but again, it's important because that's going to be a trace in our next programs also. Now, after leading the government, and again, most of the things already in place, they don't have to do a lot of changes. But what do you think? What are the main things or major issues Queensland state is going to be faced, and how Labour government is going to be address it? From your point of view?
The Premier, Anastasia, has the advantage that she's already got control of government and has for 6 years. She now has another 4 years. So for the first time in her career as Premier, she actually has a substantive majority. In other words, she can actually do things independently of others, and she doesn't have to worry quite as much.
Right.
So she has the mandate to do things that she would like to do. She certainly has appointed some new ministers to work with her. She has a very young ministry.
Yes.
She also has probably a better balanced ministry. There's certainly a lot of women now involved in the cabinet, so that's good. And many of them from different backgrounds as well. So she certainly has that. Her dilemma would probably be her budget, that not having a substantive surplus and having a large deficit, she will be limited in what she can and can't do. And probably redefining or connecting her relationship with the federal government could ease some of that financial burden, but that will depend on how her and the government deal with the Conservative federal government. The other issue is Queensland basically voted her in because she had kept the state safe from coronavirus.
Right.
But having said that, it's the federal government that's going to hand out the vaccines and support the manufacturing of it. So she'll probably maximise her opportunities off the federal government in that regard. In terms of economic growth and development, I think she will be fairly strategic in that as to what would support the unions. If the unions see that they're getting substantive value out of where the projects and the funding is being put, she knows that she'll keep them on side.
Right.
And before the election, she ran into problems with one of the biggest unions in Australia. So I think she'll want to rebuild that relationship, and she will probably put money in the areas where their union members would maximise the benefits.
So,
and to a degree, that was one of the issues with the Adani mining.
Right. Now, unions, how powerful are these unions?
In Australia, the unions are the power base behind the Labor government. They fund it. If you ever research the background to most of the Labor politicians, they are either members of the union or have been in the management structures, industrially or behind the unions. So very, very powerful group. And the Australian Constitution is built around the power of industrial relations and the unions, and we're the only constitution in the world that deals in arbitration and reconciliation with unions. No other country in the world has that built into their constitution. So unions are a key element of our very existence in Australia.
Right, right. Mr. Bernard Malik, we learn from the book of Professor Pitman what is going to be faced and how it's going to be handled also. I like to know from you also. Ultimately, we are end of the show. We still have some time, but this topic is important that in next future, when we are going to have some shows, we would like to see exactly what happening on what we predict and that what kind of objective is going to be consider for this state. And again, if you like to add something about the role of the union, you are feel free. But we'd like to know more about that what problems they are going to face and how they are going to handle it.
On your question about the unions are very powerful.
Powerful.
A lot of ministers get appointed because they have union backing. A lot of ministers get upgraded because they have union backing. So if the premier cannot afford to piss off the unions.
Right.
He has to work in close conformity with them. So very powerful, yes. I think Premier has a very big mandate at the moment. She got more seats than she got before. she should and she will work for the welfare of people. I think she understands this probably is her last term. Even if the Labour comes back in the next term, she would have to perform and develop a legacy for herself. She has shown a very strong leadership. Letting that time Deputy Premier Jafary go from the cabinet was a very strong decision. She, I think, is a great leader.
But what issues do you think that they are going to face? Again, that's wonderful that they have the majority, they have the good number of seats, and for them, is doing and playing for their show is much easier than before. But what do you think that the area where they were before, they're needing a lot of support from the independent or other parties, while this time they can easily plan financial, health sector, everything, immigration changes.
I think this is the best time to be premier in Queensland because you were a very strong federal leader who's looking after people by giving money, providing opportunities for growth.
Right.
Riding on the best time, best ship at the moment. As long as you don't make any mistake, you will be successful by default. And that's what has happened. If you say that these are labor policies that have kept the state safe, no, I'm sorry. The labor policies in Victoria are not working.
Not working.
There are issues. Over here, all the premier did was, yes, we got lucky, and she's a strong leader. She made all the right decisions. But again, so is Andrew. Andrew is a strong leader. He's making right decisions, but things are not working in his favor when it comes to COVID-19.
Yeah.
Over here, I think she would have smooth sailing. I don't perceive any issues with her.
Right. Right. Coming back to last thing from Professor Pitman. Professor Pitman, Dr. Bernard Malik mentioned also, and you also mentioned that she already Premier was already there in as a leader for 6 years, and then this 4 years ultimately is after that, as per constitutionally, she was helped to find a successor. The new engage with the new minister, especially from the female side. Do you think that she already start working on the search of the successor from these new appointees?
I think one of the dilemmas she faced in the previous term as Premier was some of her ministers were found wanting, both in terms of their personal behaviour as well as their judgment in some of their decisions. So I think what she wants to do is develop a new group of ministers who could take the challenge up and succeed. And I think what she's also after is the next generation of Labor politicians to be groomed now. One of the inherent problems in Australia is most parties hang on to their ministers for years and years and years. And then when they lose, they've got nothing to fall back on. And I think she's making the right move by bringing a lot more younger women and that in to get them trained so that they can pass the baton on to the next generation of Labor politicians. The biggest error I think we make is that we perhaps don't do that well with the rising generation of politicians.
Right. Dr. Bernard Malik, last thing. When now Premier has already discussed that she made changes and she's looking, when you become a leader and that much powerful leader, for a good start, you might need a synchronized think tank, the people which were paid, so you can move very easily at the beginning for at the start of 1-2 years, and then slowly you can make some tough decision. Do you think that bringing new people is basically building a mindset think tank and then plan for next moves?
I think she's a very mature leader. She became premier, everybody said, oh, she's an accidental premier. Nobody thought she was going to be successful. I think she's a very mature leader, And when she makes a move, there is a lot more than what we can read. So if she's in new people, what she's trying to say that now I'll bring a change. No, we do not know what kind of change would be there.
Yes.
This is honest to God, this would be one of the best terms she has had. She has no problem at all. She's completely empowered. She has enough people, she can pass any legislation she wants. All she needs to be is prudent, and she has always shown. She ruled well when she had very thin majority. Now she's excellent. She will do very well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Bernard Malik. And I think God bless our premier also, as Dr. Bernard Malik said, that that's the perfect, best time she had. And again, she has changed, and change will ultimately will be known by the time. Today, we discuss why the position leader has been changed, and I think that that was one of the hot topic at this stage. And then there are few other things, job seeker, job keeper. Reason for these topics and this discussion that we would like to engage the community on these things. And we believe, thanks to Dr. Bernard Malik, thanks to Professor Pitman, and thanks to 72 News, that we believe they all three believes that there is a need of these kind of discussion where our people, migrants especially, they start understand and engage in these kind of discussion, debates, politics, and ultimately be a part of the strong community, healthy community. And this is a part of exercise of the healthy community. Thanks again to Dr. Bernard Malik. Thanks to Professor Pitman. See you guys. See you next Monday. Till then, it's goodbye from Shoaib. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.